Maybe it was my upbringing that influenced me to make that decision. But I think that while determinism overall kind of determines what kind of person, if you grow up poor, you'll probably end up being poor. Leaving out any, very crazy out there circumstances. Maybe you're a really good athlete and you get a scholarship to a really good college. For the most part, that kind of determines how you're going to be. But that doesn't mean that things might not change. I heard there was recently a really bad heat wave up in the Pacific Northwest up there. And honestly, it's going to be a pretty hot summer. It has been a very hot summer. And if you're like me and you have trouble with staying hydrated when it's hot out and you sweat a lot or the heat just gets to you, then you need cold water. But going back and forth to the fridge, that's a pain in the ass. Pain in the ass. So why not keep your cold water with you in a bottle that'll keep it cold for a long time, is easy and convenient to use, and not to mention, looks pretty damn stylish. Introducing the Coldest water. It's a brand that has a lot of different products, but my favorite thing from them are their water bottles. I actually have two of them. And I gotta say, I really like this upgrade. You versus who she tells you not to worry about. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, if you would like to get one, you can actually get it for a pretty good discount. The link in the description. I have an affiliate code as well as an affiliate link. Go check it out. I get a cut of whatever you make, and you get a fairly sizable little bit taken off of the total buy if you pick anything up. Are you like a vegan that wants to debate in favor of veganism? Are you not? I'm not vegan. You are a vegan. All right. Patek. Talk to me, Patek. Unmute. Come on. Let's do this. I gotta get back to the game.
How you doing, Alex?
How you doing, brother? How are you?
Pretty good.
Alright, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
You're not a vegan, right?
I'm not a vegan. I love my meat.
I guess we'll just get straight to the question. So, is there something that you think animals will lack that justifies killing them for food?
No. No, not really.
So it's just like a comfort thing?
I think that if we really want to just like skip over the line of dialogue that happens in every veganism debate ever, then we can just go straight to like a basic fundamental idea that I think most people who aren't vegans have. So most vegans would like, if we went back and forth, we would get down to the point of like, okay, so why is it wrong to have sex with an animal if you are taking away an animal's autonomy, and you see no basic difference between an animal and a human in this case? Why do you think it's bad to rape an animal, but you don't think it's bad to kill an animal and eat its meat? And the argument that I would make is, at least in our society, we view someone who's willing to fuck an animal and derive pleasure, for the most part, from the animal's suffering, specifically, to be able to witness that suffering in real time, as opposed to if you sit down and eat a burger, you're not watching, in most cases, not watching the animal get butchered. That speaks a lot to the moral character of the person doing it. And I think that's why we have such a, also it's gross as fuck, fucking animal, pretty fucking gross. It kind of turns your stomach if that's not what you're into. So I think it's a combination of that things why a lot of people, including myself, have that double standard. But for me, at least, I enjoy meat. I enjoy the flavor of it. It's something I'm just simply like not ethically consistent on. Like I like meat, but I've seen videos of what happens in slaughterhouses and how like I saw some video of like this machine that drowns sheep to kill them or something. I don't know if that was what was happening. It looked like it was. And I see a video like that and I'm like, ugh, it's fucking awful. And I feel shitty for like an hour, but then I forget about it and I eat meat again. Overall,
Yeah.
like my goal is I really hope that we, in my lifetime, reasonably soon in my lifetime, reach a point where lab-grown meat is like a mainstay, something that outnumbers normal meat in supermarkets. I don't know how well that'll work based on like the cattle industry and other farming industries, but that is like the dream that I have. I don't enjoy the fact that the meat that I enjoy comes from, an animal and that they have to suffer and die and live in horrible conditions in order to get that meat from them. I prefer seafood. That's a bit more ethical than I'd say like the factory farming kind of shit,
So,
But yeah, it's more
would
or
you
less my
advocate
position
for
on it.
Would you advocate for like a more, I guess, like humane way of killing animals for food?
Broadly, yeah, of course. I think the way that animals are treated in most factory farming situations are pretty bad. They're like cramped and overfed and shot up with like I think they put in like they inject them with water, right? Like with saline to make the muscles seem bigger. Isn't that the thing that they do as well? In a lot of animals.
Yeah, I think I've heard something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like if I've the I've never like gone hunting normally, like killed like a deer and had to put it down and then skin it and eat it. Most of my stuff I've done like that has been fishing, and the rule of thumb with fishing has always been if you're not going to eat it, you throw it back. If it's smaller and you're not going to eat it, maybe use it as bait. And if you get a big fish and you're going to eat it, the first thing you do is kill it in a way that'll instantly kill it. No pain. You want it out of the water for as short a time as possible. You don't want to have it sitting there gasping for breath. You know, I don't enjoy seeing that. I don't enjoy doing it, and I don't particularly enjoy killing the fish. But you know, it's a little bit more. I'd say morally ethical. Like in the also, of course, I try not to waste any of the food. Right? I don't want the animal to go to waste. If I do that.
Well, I just think there's no real ethical way to kill a sentient being, especially if we're gonna like concede that we're gonna give this being some sort of moral
But are
worth.
you sure about that? You don't think there's any case where you can ethically kill another sentient being?
Uh, I mean, you can. There's more ethical ways to like participate in the act of killing something, but in general, just killing the sentient being is unethical, no matter how you do it.
What about killing bugs?
I mean, there can be an argument made that some bugs are sentient. I don't really go that route, but yeah, there's an argument
I
there.
think some bugs are sentient. Like there's some bugs that I will under no circumstances kill on purpose, right? I think when it comes to bugs, a lot of people are kind of iffy about that because the existence of certain bugs does kind of, you know, impede on your own like living conditions and your own standard of living, right? Like if you have a garden and you've got these massive like back in Florida, where if you're okay saying it and you don't want to get doxxed, like have you ever been to Florida? Do you live somewhere
Yeah,
that's
yeah. I
like a bit
live in Tampa.
tropical? Oh, well, hey, this is exactly the place I'm talking about. Then you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know those little like black grasshoppers that come in like once or twice a year and they grow up into these big orange motherfuckers with wings. You know the ones I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah. They're pretty big.
Yeah, those motherfuckers. I will stomp those things anytime I see them because I've seen what they can do to a garden. They fuck up the neighborhood. I think they're an offshoot of locusts. They're awful, awful, awful creatures. But if you see a butterfly, you're not going to kill it. I think for the most part, because a butterfly doesn't hurt you. In fact, it's beneficial to have butterflies around. But you know, when you have a cricket or a cockroach in your house, it's like, well, fuck. Cockroaches spread diseases. You know, you don't want that crawling on your food. You don't want that in your house. So it's like I'd say morally okay to kill them, even though you could make an argument they're most definitely sentient, right? They run around, they mate, they interact. Cockroaches run up to each other and they like talk. They have ways of communicating. There's a certain degree to which we're okay with killing another sentient being that's lesser than us, and even on the same level as us, another human being. I think it's completely moral to shoot someone if they're coming at you with like a knife, you know, and they could hurt you. I think self defense and using deadly force in self defense if it's necessary is completely moral.
I agree. I think
Yeah,
there can definitely be some lines, like arbitrary lines drawn. So obviously, if we have insects invading our home.
I'm
That's
about to kill
obviously
one
in
right
most
now.
cases.
If this, I'm about to kill
Yeah,
one
yeah,
right now on stream. If that gnat keeps fucking flying around here, it keeps annoying me.
yeah. In most
There it is.
cases, that's totally justified. I'd say that like you're already giving animals moral consideration, the animals that we eat, because you're advocating for a more humane way of killing them. Uh, yeah, I just think
Like
that in
I should be
general, there.
clear. When I see a cow in real life, I think, wow, it's such a cute cow, and I can literally the next day go eat a burger. If I had to see that cow get killed and someone offered me a burger made from that cow, I'd turn it down. I was like, I mean, I pet that cow. I liked it, right? It's not like a logical. I think a lot of people. Are you like super into philosophy by any chance?
Yeah, I like philosophy.
Yeah, I could bet, right? Most people, the reason the entire philosophy, like the entire field of philosophy exists, is because humans, for the most part, don't really think logically. And the goal of philosophy is trying to like figure out why we think the way we do and figure out ways where pointing out very obvious contradictions and then trying to reconcile that, right? That's the point of philosophy at the end of the day, I would argue, right? And I think most people, and something a lot of people that are really into philosophy don't realize is, yeah, humans are not like logical thinking. You know, like you could, like, if we talk about Vosh's like controversial statement about like child porn and child labor, I mean that is a logically sound statement, but at the end of the day, we dislike child porn more than child labor because it's gross. We find it disgusting. If you're not a pedophile and you hear about child porn, you go, ugh, fucking who's looking at that shit? And you want to beat up a pedophile, right? Obviously, that's what we all want to do. But it's not necessarily like a logical thought process, right? I think a lot of people forget that that's how humans think. We are pretty emotional with how we consider things and the morality of things, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing all the time.
Yeah, no, I understand. So I was just wondering. So like to me, I can't get it through my head. What's the difference between humans and animals? Would you say?
I mean, to a degree, and this is even true among other humans, right? So, animals are, for the most part, besides a few species, lesser than us in the sense that they have lesser cognitive function. Though there are humans that have been said to have the same cognitive function as some animals, right? Sounds ableist to say, but I mean, I argued the vegan on this topic, and they brought this some examples up. I don't think there's anything fundamentally different. We're all made up of the same things, right? At the end of the day, I think it's just people are willing to look. If people gain something from something else that makes them happy, and they don't have to see the suffering right in front of their faces 24/7, then they can very easily forget about it. It's like a rich person who has plenty of money to end homelessness and world hunger. If they can block out of their mind that world hunger and homelessness exists, they're not going to feel like what they're doing is this morally bad. In the same way that someone who eats meat, if they were subjected 10 hours a day to watching videos of animals being slaughtered and living in horrible conditions, I imagine they'd probably end up going vegan just because they couldn't abide in eating that meat, in the same way that if like you really liked a cow that lived in your backyard and then it got killed and made into a burger and someone offered it to you, you'd probably say no in that same way, right? It's very emotional.
I just feel like I see what you're saying. I just feel like you would need to extend this to almost everything, and that would be just kind of weird.
What do you mean? Like, could you give me an example of what you'd extend it to?
Um, yeah, like if you were to go to like this is kind of like a harsh example, but like a product like produced by slavery, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're not directly like witnessing the exploitation going on there, but it's still happening, and you're participating in it indirectly by like
Buying the
consuming it.
products.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same exact thing. And I think it completely extends that way. Like Vosh said in his point, this shirt was probably made using some kind of like horror, like a lot of electronics were. I'm sure my graphics card and some of my computer parts, most certainly, especially the raw materials, were gained through very immoral, almost slavery-like measures. Probably the materials used to make my shirt and my clothes and most of the stuff I'm streaming with. The problem is, and I'll say this as not necessarily the only reason why people still continue to support these products, but definitely one of them. There's not really any other alternatives. If you want to buy computer parts, there aren't really any like socialist what's the word for it, unionized co-ops that are producing ethically sourced graphics cards and monitors and cameras and stuff like that I can buy. Most of these products are made by like four different companies that are owned by like two of the same parent companies and are all produced by the same thing, the same process. And I haven't looked into the sweatshop that probably put together my clothes, and that way I'm able to kind of look past it. It's a mix of necessity and blissful ignorance.
Oh, would that be justification for you though?
Necessity and blissful ignorance?
Yeah.
Moral justification? It depends. Morality is judged by both yourself and others. If we live in a society where everybody wears clothes, or almost everybody wears clothes that come from these like immoral, non-ethical sources, then I'd guess yeah, because that society kind of judges morals for the most part. Most people probably wouldn't look at me sideways for walking outside in a shirt that everyone else wears from the same brand that was probably made in a sweatshop, right? If you want to talk about personally, I mean, it makes me feel bad. I'm not happy about it. There are ways to get clothes that are ethically sourced, but I mean, yeah, most people just don't go out of their way to do that.
Yeah. I just feel like there needs to be some sort of like like I guess intervention for beings that can't
Well,
really defend themselves or have a voice in what's going on.
yeah,
Um,
and I understand that, but I think this extends even further to law as well, right? Like, do you agree with the idea of in our criminal justice system judging an individual who's committed a crime, even a violent crime, differently based on their mental capacity, right? So if you've got someone who is a diagnosed sociopath who so extreme that they cannot even begin to understand the why their actions are wrong. Like they killed someone, they cannot fathom how that's a bad thing to do. When the psychiatrist talks to them, they're like, "Why'd you do it? Why did you do this?" He's like, "Why not? Like, it's not that big." Like, yeah. Do you agree with holding that person or analyzing that person or judging that person legally by the law, by our criminal justice system differently than someone who's completely aware of why what they did was wrong?
I mean, it depends what you mean by differently, because I feel like they should
Well,
be.
their
Yeah,
insanity plea, right? The argument that this person could not understand that what they were doing was wrong, so they need to be institutionalized, or some other, action needs to be done upon them besides just sending to prison for life, like you would someone who's neurotypical, right?
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so I think it's something pretty similar to that, right? In the same way that someone who's like extremely sociopathic might not understand that killing someone is wrong, the average person probably for one isn't even aware of how fucked up a lot of the sourcing for the products they use every day are, and even if they are, it's like, well, what can I do about it, right? Like it's not like I can scan everything I buy, everything I consume to make sure it was ethically produced. It's not. This is an issue. Like it not everybody is super logical with their thinking. Most people do not even feel comfortable analyzing their biases and their moral inconsistencies. It's something a lot of people are uncomfortable with. Have you seen Destiny's debate with no bullshit? The like second one.
I think so.
Their debate about incest that they had.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like no bullshit had probably the average human being's reaction to that discussion in that debate. Like, why is incest wrong in this case when there's no negative outcomes? Right? That's a case where a lot of people have a moral opinion or an opinion on a certain thing being immoral that they can't really explain. And at the end of the day, it's because it's gross. It makes us feel gross. We don't like to hear about it. It's not logical in that case, but we feel that way nonetheless because of a very emotional reason. I don't think that's necessarily entirely bad. I think it's okay sometimes for emotions to drive your morality. That's part of, I think, how we arrive to the position that many things are illegal. I don't think, say, for example, bestiality is illegal in most places because it's morally wrong, like in a logical, philosophical way. I think it's illegal because people think it's gross and disgusting. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Um, but going back to what you said, I don't really think I could draw like the comparison between someone who didn't understand, who actually like didn't have the mental capacity to understand what they were doing, to like someone who's just appealing to ignorance, I guess. I think
Mm-hmm.
that like you can be ignorant. That's fine to like what you're consuming and like the effects of that, but it's just um, it still exists, right? Like there's no justification for it. That's basically my whole argument.
What do you mean by justification? Like a moral, like something that makes it morally correct, or that maybe takes some of the moral burden off of the person consuming that product?
It makes it, I guess, morally correct. I mean, it doesn't
Okay,
even need to be
I
morally
don't.
correct. You're just
Yeah, I think the morality of an action, for the most part, doesn't change, no matter who it is committing that action. However, the moral condemnation that the person who committed that action deserves changes based on that, right? Like, murder doesn't become any less wrong because the person who did it was a sociopath that couldn't understand why what they were doing was wrong. But someone who's a sociopath that is literally incapable of understanding why since birth, of understanding why that action is wrong, I feel like they're deserving of a little bit more leeway in that respect because they literally cannot cognitively understand why what they did is wrong. Doesn't make the
yeah. I
murder
mean,
any less wrong, right?
no, that's true. I guess from more of like philosophical standpoint, I'd say that even their state of being is not really entirely in their control. Um, and even if they weren't a sociopath, just that the actions taken aren't really in their control. Because I'm more of a determinist, so But I
Me
think
too. I mean,
desires can be,
we could.
yeah.
I'm a big time determinist. I think determinism is almost everything that decides what a person is going to be. Your upbringing. No man is an island. All of that. I mean, we could even do the deterministic argument, right? Like, if I'd grown up with vegan parents, I'd probably be a vegan. My girlfriend's a vegetarian. She only eats like occasionally eats chicken, but besides that, mostly like seafood. And besides that, like she doesn't even drink like normal milk. She drinks almond milk only, right? Um, she
Well,
had that upbringing, and that's how she was raised. She doesn't even know what steak tastes like. Like when I put a steak in front of her, and I was like, "Here, just try a little tiny bite. You don't even have to swallow it. Just taste it." She was like, "No, I can't even stand the smell," because she's never even been able to associate that with food. For someone like me who grew up, eating meat my entire life, when I smell steak, my mouth starts watering. I'm like, "Fuck, I want a steak so bad." But in Lonnie's case, that isn't a thing. So like for me, it would be much harder to kick meat than it would be for someone like Lonnie, who would be like, yeah, I mean, I can go without chicken and even fish probably. Like most of her diet is vegetables and vegan stuff, like stuff that's not produced through animal suffering. So there is a deterministic thing there too, where it's a bit of a harder thing to overcome if you've spent your whole life eating meat. Like that's a hard habit to break. There are people who I'm pretty sure like if you go from like meat eater to vegan, there are people who have to like wean themselves off of meat. Oh wow, is that a present? Oh, thank you, thank you. Huh, late birthday present, thank you. I'll have to open that in a second. Yeah, I think that it kind of depends, right? Like, don't people who've ate meat their entire lives who switch over to veganism, don't they have to wean themselves off? Otherwise, they could get sick.
uh, I mean, in some cases, I guess. But like, real quick, going
Because I,
back to
I
vegan,
know it's the other way around. Because like people who are vegan who try meat get sick from trying meat. I know it's the other way around. So I assume it would be.
well, I mean, like more, I don't know, because like eating meat typically doesn't have that much of an effect. I think on people's stomachs, it's very easy to digest. But I think going
It
back, like,
depends. Red meat is tough, isn't it?
I'm not sure.
I know for a fact people like if you go I think it's 3 months eating nothing but like you know like not meat, right? Just eating grain, maybe a little dairy, probably not even dairy if you're vegan, right? Like you eat mostly grain, vegetables, and fruits, and then you after 3 months eat a steak for the first time, you'll get sick. Or that's the thing.
Well, I mean, just anecdotally, I've been vegan and like I grew up eating meat and then I went vegan and then because I lived with my parents, I had to eat meat again, so I never really got sick off that.
Huh, interesting. Probably lucked out.
But
I think yeah. Yeah, you go.
I think like going back to like the deterministic thing, I would say that the determinist would say that people's outcomes and desires aren't really able to be changed. So like it being brought up in like a meat eating environment, you wouldn't even really be able to determine or be influenced to become vegan, or maybe you will. It's completely up to
I I
causality.
just I
So
disagree with that. I think that's not even determinist. A determinist would I would generally think would agree that if you take an 18-year-old who's eaten meat his whole life, you can bring him over to be a vegan. And after 18 more years, that deterministic mindset like says that well this person's ate nothing no meat for the last half of his life. So now that kind of shaped the person he is now 18 years later, right?
I'd
I
say
think
that
that can be
that's more like,
changed, right?
I mean, I'd say that's more compatibilism because you're being influenced through rehabilitation in some sense
It can be
to
personal choice.
or
Like
personal choice, right? That rejects determinism, though.
no, not necessarily. I think determinism contributes to what personal choices you'll make. I was raised to be left leaning, and nonetheless, I fell down the alt right rabbit hole, and that's what I was conditioned into for a long time. And it was only because I happened to decide to give a Destiny video a shot that I ended up beginning my journey to get pulled out of that stuff. So just not only, despite being raised to be very progressive, did I fall into very far right politics, but I also made the decision on my own to listen to what the opposition had to say when it came to the Destiny debate with JonTron. Maybe it was my upbringing that influenced me to make that decision, but I think that while determinism overall kind of determines what kind of person, if you grow up poor, you'll probably end up being poor. Leaving out any, very crazy out there circumstances. Maybe you're a really good athlete and you get a scholarship to a really good college. For the most part, that kind of determines how you're going to be, but that doesn't mean that things might not change. All sorts of things could happen to change up what a deterministic mindset would typically guess your outcomes would be from your
So I
upbringing.
think what you're describing is like sort of an illusion of free will, because the desires which produce the outcome or the final action in any given scenario are what typically the determinists would say that the individual can't control. So the desires which compel you to make a decision or to do an action are what you can't control. So you may think like, oh, I changed here, and throughout the course of my life, but in reality the determinists would usually say, no, you didn't. Like, you were never in control. It's just an illusion.
Well, at the end of the day, nobody actually has free will, right? Like, if I wanted to just stand up and whip my cock out on stream, I mean, I couldn't, you know, I wouldn't because, well, I'd get banned from Twitch and YouTube and I'd lose my job, right? There's always certain social barriers that people realistically, besides certain, outlying circumstances that, they aren't going to do even though they want to. In that way, free will has never really been a thing because there are certain things you may want to do, but either it's the law or social punishment that keeps you from doing those things. But when it comes to free will on your decisions, that's partly true. But if we're talking about free will on what you want to do, I think your wants and desires, for the most part, besides a few things that happen due to your development, I think for the most part you have the freedom to feel how you feel, right? There are gay people that are raised in very homophobic households that end up realizing they're gay and bucking the expectations of their parents and their community and whatnot, and end up coming out, moving away maybe, and living their life how they want to. I don't think that your upbringing entirely determines how you're going to turn out, right? Because if that was the case, most homophobes would stay homophobes forever, even if they were, if it turned out they were gay. Most closeted gay people who grew up in homophobic communities would stay homophobic just for the sake of the community because that's what they were taught, and it would never really realize who they are. And that happens in some cases, but in most cases, I think they end up realizing who they are and coming out because that's what they want to do, even though that's everything about their upbringing goes against that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I'm a compatibilist. I think that desires can be influenced either through rehabilitation or just there's it can be influenced through many things. But I also I don't think what you're describing is determinism because you said you're a determinist. So that's
I am. No, I am. If you take someone who grew up in a really shitty situation and you ask me like what do you think this person's going to end up being like, I'm going to guess like based on their upbringing what kind of person they're going to end up being. This is the mindset this is actually the mindset I've had my whole life before I even knew what determinism was. If I saw like when I was younger and I was in like middle school, I knew what kids in my class, just based on how they acted, how they were growing up, what their family situation was like, what their grades were like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, which one of them were going to be teen mothers or teen fathers? Which one of them were going to grow up to be drug dealers or in prison? Which ones would grow up to be successful? Which ones would probably end up killing themselves? Like, it's a little morbid to think about, but even from a young age, I kind of that's just how I've seen things, right? There's a little bit more nuance in there. I think things could change down the road for them that sort of buck that expectation that I've come up with because like just kind of guessing off their upbringing, but usually that ends up being the case, right? I think it's plenty determinist.
wait. So do you think determinism is based on like a chain of causation then?
It depends. I think so. Let's use an example, right? Maybe this will help like illustrate my thought process on this. Let's say you've got a kid, right? And this kid has a is raised by a single father, and this single father is a fucking alcoholic, abusive drunk who beats the kid every day. There's there. My intuition would lead me to think, well, that kid might grow up. Maybe they'll do all right. Maybe they won't. Kind of depends. And maybe they'll have kids one day. What kind of parent do I think this person would be? Well, they might be someone who resents their abusive alcoholic father who beat them and want to be the exact opposite of that with their kids. Or they might think, well, I turned out okay, if they turn out okay, and end up emulating that same behavior on their own kids. I think in that sense, that's something that, could go left or right?
Um, yeah, so I do agree with you, but I just think we're disagreeing on like what determinism is. So I think that like determinism would be like a chain of causation, dating back to the start of the universe, based on untouchable facts. So the next following like sequence would be an untouchable fact, and basically
So,
like nothing can be changed in this chain of causation. So it's
oh,
kind of like
okay.
an illusion. Yeah.
So you think, so you believe more or less in fate, not in the sense that there's some cosmic divine, being that's decided your fate for you, but like ever since the Big Bang, when every atom in the universe, was scattered throughout the cosmos and started forming planets, that basically everything was already determined by that point. Earth was, because of its position, because of the circumstances, was going to end up developing human life, and that human life was going to end up developing in a certain way. And there's nothing you can really do to change the overall fate of the universe at the end of things, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's like a chain of causation.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I think on a smaller scale, it's not always true. I think there are certain points where maybe someone would realistically have a certain outcome. I think if you had the ability, like for example, maybe there's a friend that knows you very well, and this friend knows what your tendencies are. This friend knows what your personality is like, and they see you heading down a bad road, and they intervene to get in the way of that. Now, a determinist may argue, well, that was always supposed to happen. Others might say, well, no, certain circumstances happen that made these two people meet, and that friend said, hey, don't do this thing. I know you want to do this thing, but don't do this thing. And that person doesn't do the thing that they would do based on their personality. This type of thing. Would you say that was always determined to happen? So a deterministic worldview would always account for any outstanding circumstances like that?
Well, hold on. Let me just clarify. I can play devil's advocate because I do like learning about determinism and stuff. But I am a compatibilist. I think that everything can be influenced and changed. Outcomes can be changed. So I am not a determinist.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, compatibilism actually sounds more compatible with what I think, but I think determinism has a few very, very convincing philosophical arguments to me. I think in most cases, someone's upbringing and where they come from and the circumstances that led to their existence can greatly impact what's going to happen to them, what they're going to do, what they're going to think, what they're going to believe. But I also think there's cases where that natural track of events that you would very realistically be able to predict could be thrown off by outlying circumstances, right? I think a good mix of those two things is good. And if that's what compatibilism is, then, well,
yeah.
maybe that's what I
It
am. I'm not
essentially
a
is.
big, you have to remember, I'm not a big philosophy guy.
Yeah, yeah. Um, would you want to talk about one more thing actually?
Yeah, if you want to. I'm having fun.
What is your like preferable economic system?
Oh, this is interesting. This is actually something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I think that in the same way that humanity over the centuries of it, not even centuries, the how long have anatomically modern humans been around? Like like a few million years, like 4 million years. It's been a few million years, I think. Anatomically, like identical humans to what we are now have been around for a long time. Um,
200,000 years. I thought. I don't know.
Anatomically,
Like the
really, just two
modern
hundred
human.
thousand? Well, I mean,
Modern
two
human.
hundred thousand. Like, I get okay. Wow. All right, that's a lot shorter than I thought. Fuck. Okay. Damn. Um. Yeah, it's been about 12,000 years since the agricultural revolution. Well, if you look at the history of humanity, you'll notice that we have changed so much, not on a biological or evolutionary scale, but on a cultural and technological and economic scale. I'd argue the economy first started to exist whenever humans started getting together, farming and trading shit, right? So you had basic trading to begin with. Then you sort of evolved to like feudalism and serfs, mercantilism. And eventually now we've got capitalism. And of course, there's the theories of communism and socialism, which Marx used interchangeably, but some lefties don't acknowledge it that way, right? Um, I don't think capitalism is the end of our innovation on economics. I don't think socialism or communism are the end either. I think as human society evolves, there will be certain things that happen that may just make capitalism redundant. I think if someone invents a machine that can materialize anything from basic matter, something like they have it in Star Trek, right? Like a machine that can make anything out of like some like rearrange matter to become anything, food, a couch, a TV, a graphics card. Like if we end up evolving to that point, capitalism is pointless. Other than, I guess, selling that thing. Maybe then there'd still be capitalism for selling that thing, but I mean, you could just make more of it with an item like that. I think there are going to be certain technological innovations that are going to make capitalism redundant. I think we're going to reach a point where some philosopher out there discovers an even more efficient, unthought of before economic system that ends up getting popular with some countries and ends up being popularized and spread through the world. I just don't think capitalism is the end of the road. I see no
Oh,
reason for it to be. Our
can I ask?
technological advances aren't the end of the road, and I don't think capitalism is either.
So, do you think that there's anything inherently wrong with capitalism, though?
It depends. Do you think there's anything inherently wrong with people not being reimbursed appropriately for their work?
Yes.
Then you'd say yeah, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
idea of capitalism is that you've got private ownership of the means of production. There's an individual who owns something, and due to necessity, people are more or less forced to participate in producing, or there's tons of different jobs out there, right? That aren't, that aren't co-ops, right? To work in order to keep things like to live, right? In under capitalism, you kind of have to work to live unless you've got a very strong welfare state in that particular area in that nation, right? I guess you could live off of unemployment, but that's usually not practical. You kind of have to work, and you're in a capitalist economy like here in America, especially with our hardcore work culture. You kind of have to work or die.
Yeah, and to add on, I'd also say like it just alienates people, and even though people and the workers are the ones providing things for the market forces are what control them. So I think
Yeah,
that's just inherently what's wrong with it. I
I
do think there is a solution though.
I want to clarify. I don't think markets on their own are that bad. I think markets are a cool thing. Like, conceptually, I like the idea of markets. I think the idea of there being things that someone wants and things that someone else has, and there being some sort of desire to have an exchange there, I think that's fine. I think markets existing is not the end all be all of human suffering by any means. I think you can have a society that does where the workers do have some meaningful and reasonable reimbursement for their work that doesn't necessitate the dissolving of markets.
Okay. Well, what would you think that would be?
Well, I'm no economic theorist, but I mean, isn't market socialism a thing? Isn't that where the workers own the means of production, but markets still exist and there's still commodification of certain things? But for the most part, people, they're able to make the ends meet much better than under capitalism, theoretically.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think I've been lost in kind of like my vision for like a society which would fit what I believe in stuff. So like
I
I
mean, we
actually
all want
watch a
Star
lot of
Trek style luxury space communism, right? Like we all want there to be just no money. Everyone does things because they are genuinely like motivated to do things. I find that a lot of people who are really hardcore shills for capitalism will argue that if everybody has all of their fundamental needs met, they won't want to do anything. I disagree with that. I really, really do. Capitalism, I think, is a perfect example of this. There are plenty of people out there that are extraordinarily rich. They could live the rest of their lives not only comfortably, but extravagantly. They could retire today and they would have their yacht, they'd have 6 mansions, they'd have all the money they ever need. They'd never hurt for money, right? But they still keep doing what they're doing. And I think the reason for that is the human brain desires more. The human brain, while you're in a shitty situation, the human brain wants to be in a better situation. But if you were in that better situation, the human brain would want to be in a better one. I think even if everybody had their basic needs met, I don't think everyone would just be sitting at home all day enjoying their basic needs being met. I think they'd want to do things. I think, in the case of Star Trek, people would want to go on a spaceship and do what the Star Trek crew does. I think there'd be people out there that want to produce things because they like making stuff. There's a reason why artists exist that don't copyright their music. There's a reason why vaccines have been made that aren't patented, and that the creators of it made no money from. Because I think there is an impetus, a biological need for a lot of humans to do something, even if their basic needs are met.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I mean, one of the things I do like about communism is just the complete elimination of like financial and social status, or just like making everyone equal in that sense,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah,
Um,
I think my main concern, and the main reason why I'm a leftist, is because under capitalism, as it stands right now, homeless people exist. People who are so low, like, working class, they're living paycheck to paycheck and can barely make it by, I don't like an economic system where that happens. I think capitalism can exist and that not happen. It's not that hard. You can have like capitalism still exist and for there not to be homeless people. You can have certain wealth distribution policies, and social safety nets that exist to prevent homeless people from existing, and from like poverty being a thing, while still having billionaires and trillionaires who make shit tons of money off the market, right? I still think it's possible. I think that's feasible.
yeah, I guess my disagreement would be just that capitalism, I think, inherently is, at least from my worldview, unethical. I don't know what like when I think of capitalism, I think of like the Enlightenment and classical liberalism. So I think based on that kind of like viewpoint of what capitalism is, that would be more leaning towards like laissez-faire capitalism. Obviously, I'm against that. Are you
Well,
against?
yeah, the idea behind laissez-faire capitalism is you let private owners do whatever the fuck they want, very little government regulation and stepping in to try to prevent certain market manipulation, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of laissez-faire capitalism, as you can probably imagine. But I mean, I would take, like right now, if I could press a button and make us live in a society that's still capitalist, but now every homeless person has a home and like has their basic needs met. They get enough food, they have a place to live, they have what they need to survive. But the capitalism's still a thing. I'd press that button in an instant. It may not be like the end all be all, but it's an improvement.
I
That's
think
like, yeah.
the thing I feel like for that, what would need to happen would be some sort of like the maintaining of like the republic and just direct democracies within each given state, and allowing just each enterprise to only have one of the the said enterprise. So you can't like there's no chance for like them to monopolize.
Wait, a set enterprise, what do you mean by that?
Like, so say someone wants to make a business, right? Like they can't make any more like any more of the same business.
But that would be a monopoly.
Yeah,
If
what I'm
if
saying
someone
is like they can't expand.
so what you're describing right now sounds like a monopoly. Like if someone already has like a computer making business, no other businesses can expand to make
No,
computers
no, no,
too.
no. No, I'm saying like if they have a computer making business, they can't make like any more of their specific business. Like they can't expand their business. Other people can make. So like basically everyone who makes business,
Oh,
you can only have one business.
well, that's not
Like you
that's
can
not
only have
really
one of
how.
the same business, if that makes sense.
Maybe that would work with like Walmart's, right? Like if there was just one Walmart, but then there's a lot of companies, especially nowadays, don't just have like their single place, right? They have, or even if they do have a single place, it's like, let's say microchip producers, right? People who make like, I don't know, like we'll use computer parts for example. Like what was this is Nvidia, right? Nvidia is my graphics card provider, right? All Nvidia needs to have a monopoly is just to have one factory, one giant factory making shit tons of graphics cards, sell them all over the world, and make them better than AMD does, right? Um, I mean, I don't take issue with what you're saying right now. I just don't think that would prevent monopolies by any means. Monopolies can happen for a variety of reasons, from scummy business practices to literally just making the best product for the most reasonable price, and people just overwhelmingly deciding to choose your service. Um, the
Yeah,
things that I have a problem with, and this is what can really, fuck, and this is the worry that I have for what you just described, is sometimes monopolies can be a good thing. Think about it like this. If there's I think, competition is good. There are places here in America, for example, that have no competition when it comes to internet service providers. It's a big issue that I worry about as a streamer. If I want to move to a place that has only one internet service provider around, they can provide the shittiest fucking internet. If that's where you live, fuck you. You want internet? You get that shitty fucking satellite 2 megabits per second internet. But if you move to somewhere like LA or something, I'm pretty sure there's multiple internet providers that you can go for, and they kind of have to compete. I think monopolies. I think what you're describing here would kind of harm people in a way, right? Because there'd be less motivation for these businesses to compete.
Yeah, I think because like my main issue with capitalism is just the potential for the capitalists or the bourgeoisie to be able to have direct political influence. So
Oh yeah, money in politics is a big issue. Yeah.
yeah. So like obviously like typically like the capitalists have lines of contact with politicians. At least in the United States, that's a big issue. They lobby. I don't know. Would you advocate from like more of like a soc dem society for the United States?
As opposed to now, absolutely. Yeah, anything that like is a percentage point of a percentage point better in my worldview than what we have now, then yeah, I'd go for that in a second. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
not an accelerationist, by the way. I don't like the people, the lefties that say, no, we don't want to go from this society to like a SOCDEM society because that'll make people more, that'll make people more content with how things are, and it won't push them to striving for even better. I don't agree with that. I think any marginal improvement we can get, we should take it the second we got the opportunity.
yeah, I agree. I think like more than that, I'd go further. I actually think we should push for socialism in the United States. I've been
Um,
watching a lot of you like I've watched a lot of you and Vosh and basically all of the left online, and I
mhm.
don't really think anyone really like breaks down how we can achieve this.
It's very hard to like even begin. Like, let's be honest. Do you believe like a revolution is plausible?
I don't think so. Well, I
Neither do I.
I can make a very good steelman for how a communist revolution would take place.
I
Would
think
it
if
be like
we
yeah?
I
I don't.
think if we have a, I think the next, if we have an economic like overhaul of America, it'll happen, like maybe a couple decades from now, maybe a century from now, because you have more people like the Justice Dems or even further left coming into power, and through the government, through already existing legal measures, overhauling our government, passing bills such as Medicare for all would be a big change. Amending our tax laws to account for the ways that very wealthy people and corporations dodge taxes. I think the biggest example of this is if you're really wealthy, money, like just liquid income, that could be taxed. But if that money goes into business expenses or it goes into physical assets, I don't think it can be taxed, depending on how it's done. There's certain ways they get around it. Amending our tax laws so that those things can be taxed, which gives the government more money to create social safety net or other social programs. Something that a lot of people on the left don't realize is that yes, you would have to tax the middle class more to afford something like Medicare for all. There's a lot of changes that can be made through the government, through more progressive politicians being in power that could get us more in that direction. As for a revolution, fuck, like
Yeah, I don't think a
I
revolution
don't,
is plausible.
I don't even see like I don't even know how we would get to a point where most Americans want a revolution. I don't know how we'd even get to that point. Like I can't even imagine that in my head, much less that revolution succeeding. Like that
Yeah.
just sounds
So
bizarre to me,
you mentioned something like what were they called? The Justice?
Justice Dems, yeah, the Justice Democrats,
Yeah.
like AOC, Ilhan Omar,
Yeah,
Bernie Sanders.
I think there needs to be like maybe like a similar group moving into sort of like the DNC and steering away from like the DNC, like the traditional DNC
Mm,
viewpoints. I
mm.
think that that would be a good step towards.
No, we two party. We're in a two-party system. The best idea is what could happen is the Republican Party goes just nosedives, which it seems to be on the way to doing right now. Just society gets so progressive that no one ever votes for a Republican again. The Republican Party dies out. The Democratic Party ends up becoming the new right wing party, and a more left wing party takes the place of the Democrat Party, while the Democrat Party takes the place of the Republican Party. That could happen. But what I think is more likely is the Republican Party sticks around for the foreseeable future, and the Democratic Party gets more and more left leaning as younger and younger people come to voting age and start supporting likes of Bernie Sanders or AOC or Ilhan Omar or the Justice Dems, and the Democratic Party is forced to become more progressive.
Okay,
I don't
yeah,
think splitting off at this state would be a good idea.
Well, in terms of like how to achieve communism, right? That would be
Oh yeah.
because like I'm trying to like steelman how a revolution would occur. I think that would need to take place, or and this is a more reductionist approach. There would definitely need to be some sort of like destabilizing of the country. So basically, just like
Yeah.
obviously win the culture war and just try to steer people away,
Oh
or
yeah.
steer people
The cul-
towards like more leftist ideas.
the culture war really is the root of everything, I think. The culture war is what gets people interested in politics. I'd say if we uploaded our talk to YouTube and my title was discussing vegan morals and how to achieve socialism in America, that was the title, it would get probably not a lot of views, frankly, because it's a pretty dry political discussion. But the culture war, trans predators in bathrooms, and Nazis marching through the streets and assaulting people, that kind of stuff, or SJWs taking over media, that's the shit that gets normies interested in politics. I think the culture war is probably as annoying as it is for people who really care about actual policy and politics might decry it. It is the basis for political discussion. There's a reason why the Republicans go so hard in the culture war. It's because they know that it works. And there's a reason why more pragmatic left-leaning people focus so much on culture war issues, and it's because they know it works. It brings people into politics, gets people interested. It's from there that you get a jumping off point to more serious political discussion from like the culture war issues.
Yeah, I definitely am trying to become a bread tuber because of it.
That's cool, yeah. Hey, if you become a bread tuber, let me give you a piece of advice, okay? If you get a boost in growth, you go off of that, okay? Listen, I think this is my honest to God opinion, okay? Good morals is nothing but something that stops you from being successful as a YouTuber, okay? In this business, like, if you can be a shameless sociopath, you will succeed. People won't like you. Lots of people won't like you. You'll have to deal with, like, the emotional burden of so many people not liking what you do, but you'll succeed if you put the work in. There's a reason why, like, so many people hate hot tub streamers, for example, but they're doing well. They're doing well, and it's because they don't really like. Most people probably wouldn't be willing to do what they do on the internet, but they do it and they do well, and it's because they don't care what other people think of them. And yeah, I think that's a big part of being a YouTuber, right? Like, there's certain for a while I didn't want to have sponsorships in my videos. I didn't want to have sponsorships in my videos because I thought that I'd get called out for it. People would hate me, but I was like, fuck it. I'm gonna do sponsorships in my videos anyway. I'm just gonna make sure they're sponsors that I'm like that I believe in. That it's not like some fucking Raid Shadow Legend shit, right? And I did it anyway. I got a little bit of hate from it, but I did it, And a lot of people in my place, like Vosh, for example, don't want to do sponsorships because they're worried how people will kind of see that, right? And that's the advice I'd give as a YouTuber. Don't be afraid to do what will help further your career. If it's like really bad, don't do it. But like things like getting sponsors on your videos or asking for donations, or like patron subs, like say, hey, sub to my Patreon if you want to support the channel. Don't be afraid to do that. Just because people will call you out and say, hey, you're a fucking grifter. That's like one of the things that held me back for a while.
Yeah, thanks. I definitely am gonna keep trying. I watched your other videos on how to be a bread tuber. I think is what it was called.
Yeah, I
Um,
made a couple.
yeah, I was wondering, do you think there's some sort of like leftist narrative on YouTube?
Leftist narrative? What do you mean?
Like, do you think there's like generally through all the creators like a narrative?
No. I fuck. This is so hard to understand from the outside looking in because I used to be in your position. When I started doing BreadTube content, oh my god, did I not know what things were really like. I had grown up getting into politics, watching the anti-SJW videos, and those guys were, for the most part, very friendly with each other. They like big creators had small creators on to talk. There wasn't really all that much beef. They mostly agreed on things. They collaborated. They felt like a community. The anti-SJW content creators, when watching their content, it felt like a community. Chris Ray Gun knew Shoe Head knew Sargon knew, these people. Like, it was a community, right? But with BreadTube, when I got into this shit, I my expectations, it's nothing like that, right? Like, Most bread tubers don't like each other for very stupid reasons, right? Like the biggest example is the Thought Slime drama I had, where Thought Slime accused me of having a sex cult, or Corvidae not liking me because of God knows why, or Lance not liking me for some reason. Like I didn't even start that whole. There's just a lot of drama that goes on behind the scenes because I think leftism is just inherently very sectarian, more so than like right wing stuff is. No, I don't think there's an overall narrative. I think if you look at what Vosh wants to support, you may find it's different from what ContraPoints, wants to support in some ways. I mean, I think overall there's a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to social issues like trans rights and LGBT rights, etc. But like when it comes to like hardcore political ascriptions, I think there's a lot of differences there, a lot more than you'd think.
Yeah. Would you recommend like doing more prepared content or streaming right away?
Fuck, it depends. So it really does depend on circumstances. So say for example, do you have a webcam?
No, no. I just got a gaming laptop. It doesn't have a webcam though.
Do you have good internet?
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got a good internet, you could try streaming. You could get a VTube set up. You could get a camera if you have the money for it. Buy a camera and you could stream. I would give the advice of saying streaming to 0 people is pointless unless what you're streaming is going to be made into appealing content that you can upload on other platforms. The way that streaming has very low discoverability. Very few new people are going to stumble across my stream on Twitch or YouTube and then subscribe to me because they see this stream. Very few people are going to do the same because they see my politics streams. What they might see, though, are my videos, especially what my most popular video, which is a prepared video I made about the alt-right rabbit hole. If you've got the stamina for it and you don't need the money, you can really grow if you put a lot of work into making the right prepared content that's good quality, and that'll bring in a lot of new people. What I'd recommend is making a few videos that are prepared, that are really good, that get a lot of people brought in, and build your audience there, then start streaming. Streaming is a much better way to maintain an audience and to monetize an audience, which I know sounds shameless, but I mean, if you're trying to do it for a living like me, then you need streaming makes more money than just uploading prepared videos does. It just does. It's a simple fact. Move to streaming from there, and then you make content from those streams. That's generally how you want to do it, no matter what you're trying to do. Political content, gaming content, whatever.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of good. If you want like some really good advice from like top to bottom of the streaming culture, Harris Heller, aka Alpha Gaming on YouTube, best channel to watch. That content will help you so much, from everything from technical things to social things to just broad advice for streaming and making content.
Thank you. And I just had one more question going back to what we were talking about earlier. Do you think the culture war is like sort of like a necessary, like some,
Necessary evil, yeah.
yeah, necessary evil for like the
Mm-hmm.
development of like a Socdem society?
For all political radicalization, I think the culture war is necessary. The right benefits from it, and the left benefits from it too. The left just needs to get better at benefiting from it. The culture war is everything. This Chris Chan situation, this is political now. The right and the left have made the Chris Chan thing political, and tons of normies are getting in on it. People who don't give a fuck about politics. If you're a political figure and you can pick people up to get involved in the politics because they care about the Chris Chan situation, boom, you've got something. That's a culture war issue. If you're someone who doesn't feel comfortable with trans women being in women's bathrooms, and you're like some random white woman from the UK, and you start watching turf content, boom, culture war stuff has just gotten you into politics, for better or for worse. I think the culture war is a necessary evil, and if the left can, swing it right, there's a lot that the left can gain from the culture war narrative.
Yeah. Do you think the left could like achieve this better through like posturing and stuff like that?
What do you mean?
Sort of like just trying to like call for like certain things that can invoke emotional responses.
So like reactionary content in the sense that it's like very emotionally driven, like this is disgusting, this is awful, this is oh yeah, and like just being very reactionary.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, if we really wanted to use what the right has done against it, you can. The problem is it always ends badly if you go solely into the reactionary stuff. There's a reason why like No Bullshit's channel is dying, why like Geeks and Gamers channel died, why the Quarterings channel died. Even though it's a very short-term successful model, it doesn't work very well in the long term. It really doesn't. There's a reason why I do these gaming streams instead of just pumping out 3 videos a day, making a big deal about every political development, because it just doesn't last long it doesn't last well in the long term. You want there to actually be substance to what you're saying, and it's really hard to do that when you're pumping out reactionary content. Not right-wing reactionary content, just reactionary.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's just hard to kind of like figure out the substance that'll kind of like get people's attention.
I mean, it just depends, right? Like, I think I strike a good balance, right? I can do content that is, not in the political sense reactionary, while also having more to say. Like, if I respond to a Blair White video, it's all good fun, but I'm making actual political arguments. I'm educating people on things they might not have known before. How many people do you think when they came, like, for example, this is a really good example. I responded to a Blair White video a while back, and in that video, Blair White said that trans women can't get cervical cancer because, well, they don't have vaginas. And then we looked it up. Turns out she was completely wrong. She was lying. She showed a piece of the article that we looked up where right below what she showed, it said, yeah, actually trans women can get cervical cancer if they get bottom surgery. You can educate people on these issues, convince them, and still produce content that's like very culture war meme nonsense that people will be willing to click on because they think it's going to be fun. And politics is the chaser, much like what the right does and what the alt-right playbook talks about. You serve them social commentary with politics as the chaser. It's the best way to get people into politics. It's how the alt-right rabbit hole works.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I do want to make another video eventually, just completely compiling all of my advice for content. I want to do that, but there's other channels that have done it. Alpha Gaming's a good one. Devin Nash is also a good one if you're specifically when it comes to Twitch and streaming. Definitely check out those channels. It's entertaining content and it's educational. You'll learn stuff.
I will. Yeah, the videos you made, the prior videos you made about it were definitely helpful.
Yeah. Well,
would you want to talk about one more thing real quick?
Yeah, sure.
What's your stance on abortion?
Yeah, so I am pro-choice when it comes to the law, and I'm pro-choice like morally. I think that if we want to get into the super philosophical moral thing, I do think to a certain degree. I agree with Philosophy Tube's video. If you've seen the one that she made, it was very, very fucking good, in my opinion. Like for a baby, inside of a woman, a fetus, even up to a day before it's born, is sort of to live. Needs to take away some amount of bodily autonomy from the person who's pregnant. Now, this could be voluntarily done, right? Like, so a woman wants to get pregnant, she gets pregnant, or a man, trans men can get pregnant, can get pregnant and be completely fine with that, but sometimes they don't want that, and it takes a certain amount of their bodily autonomy to care for that child and during their development. And I don't think it is moral to force that woman to, or to force that baby haver to carry that child. And I also think that it's dangerous for the government to have say in that sense as well, because if we allow the government to say no, you have to raise this baby, or you have to cultivate this thing inside of you, that could also be a slippery slope to other things that the government may require of you, right? Like there's the very extreme example of, well, what if you get into a car accident with someone when you're drunk driving and they need to hook you up to an IV with that person to keep them alive? You're the one that got them hurt. That's the new law now. You have to sit there as an IV for that person for the next few days until they're better. I don't like the idea of giving the government that power over people's bodily autonomy. It's a very libertarian argument, but I do agree with it.
Yeah, I just extend kind of the same position in for just sentience of being that I have for veganism. So at whatever line that's drawn, I'd be against it. I'd also argue like I don't know if you've heard of the responsibility objection. So basically, like that the person partook in an act knowingly partook in an act, knowing the possible outcomes, right? So like I think obviously in like cases which this doesn't apply, then yeah, that's obvious. But
The thing is though, like if you have a drunk driver who knew they were getting into a car drunk and something bad could happen, that got into that got into a car accident with somebody, and that other person that they got into the car accident with because they were drunk behind the wheel and they know they shouldn't have gone, would you support the government making them hook themselves up with an IV to give their blood to that other person to keep them alive for the next couple days? Do you think it's okay for the government to take away their bodily autonomy because they made the decision to get behind the wheel drunk?
I don't think in that situation that would apply. I think it's a bit different because although the moral responsibility is on the person who got in the car drunk and was responsible for the death, I don't think I think that there needs to be a line drawn because of impairment here.
Mm. But you could
Yeah.
also make the argument that being super fucking horny is an impairment too, though, right?
Uh,
It's
not like
it's a
synonymous with
chemical
this.
it's a chemical in your brain. There have been studies that show that particularly men, but women too, their cognitive, their decision making skills are a little bit inhibited whenever they're extremely horny. Like if you're super fucking turned on, you ever like you know about this? It's post nut clarity. You've had post nut clarity before, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You ever like watch a porn that's like kind of fucking weird, like some tentacle like shit? Yeah, I love my tentacle hentai. Big titty milfs getting fucking spit roasted by tentacles. Awesome stuff, right? Or just something weird like that, and you watch it, and you're just like, "Fuck it, I'll watch this" because you're horny and you want to jack off, and then after you jack off and you nut, you got post nut clarity, and you're like, "What the fuck did I just jack off to?" Yeah, yeah, this happens too. And of course, there's people who have drunk sex or high sex too, where they're inebriated and they end up getting pregnant. There, that happens all the time. Me and Lonnie have had inebriated sex before. What if I got her pregnant then? Do you think if I'm really drunk or really high, my decision making skills weren't at their peak there, just like a drunk driver behind the wheel. I think there's a lot of cases where that can extend.
Well, what was that? What was the specific case you just brought up, like scenario?
With my girlfriend,
Or no, yeah, like you said, like if you were the one that was drunk or high.
yeah, if me and my girlfriend got really drunk and then had sex and I got her pregnant, would that mean that there's like just you said that somebody who gets behind the wheel drunk, they don't have that responsibility to be IV hooked up to a person because their cognitive ability to understand the what's the word for it? I'm blanking right now, brain fart. The outcomes of their actions, they can't understand that because they're inebriated. What if they had sex and did that? Would they be morally obliged to take responsibility for that pregnancy?
So like here's basically the viewpoint. So like it makes more sense. So basically the woman participating in involuntary intercourse has consented to allow the fetus to use her body under this framework. So that's like if that wasn't the case, then she would still have the duty to sustain the fetus because the woman herself caused the fetus to stand in need of her body.
Well, didn't the man cause it too, just as much?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But in this case, obviously, the man is not able to really influence, like directly influence abortion.
I This is actually where I think pro-life people have a bit more of a decent argument to bring up. Where like, shit, what if you're a guy and you get your girlfriend pregnant and she wants to abort and you don't, or you want to abort and she doesn't? I would still agree at the end of the day she should have the choice because it is her body after all. But at the same time, like, you do have to acknowledge, fuck, that kind of sucks for the guy. That child is you took part in making that child too, right? And while she should have the final say in my moral system, that doesn't mean that sucks for the guy, right? If they disagree on that point, right? I think it's a point where pro-lifers kind of have a point, like, fuck,
Yeah.
what if the guy disagrees with the woman's decision?
But going back to like just to be good faith, in the scenario you brought up with the drunk driver, then yeah, I would say they in that scenario, yeah, they would have to give blood, just as in the scenario where there was two impaired people having consensual sex, and again, the responsibility is on the woman because of its voluntary intercourse, and by that action being committed, that's consent to allow the fetus to use her body.
So you do think the government should be able to make like a drunk driver who got into a car accident be like a living blood bag for another person who like they crashed into?
I think if this was like a wide scale issue, there'd probably be a better approach to like handling it. But like in this scenario, yeah,
Well, it's not a very realistic thing. We've got blood
yeah, yeah,
bags. We've got other ways to handle. Yeah, but I mean, it's a philosophical question. It's a moral conundrum. It's like the trolley problem, which my answer would be to probably save. I'm a bit utilitarian with that, right? Like if I was in that situation, I'd be like, fuck, you know. Although I'll admit, I would probably have the train or the trolley or whatever run over like 6 children before it runs over one dog. But that's more of a I just think dogs are cooler than kids type thing. Um, See, once again, not very logical, but it's an emotional thing, right? When
yeah.
it comes to my decision in a situation like that. Um, yeah, I'd sacrifice so many babies to save one dog. You guys have no fucking idea. You guys have no idea how many children I'd throw into hell, frankly, for eternity to save one dog. Dogs are so much better than kids. Holy shit. Um, yeah, I don't know. My main thing is I don't think that the government should have the ability to determine our bodily autonomy to that degree. I think prison, I'm against the death penalty. I even think prison, to a degree, is kind of fucked up if you think about it. For starters, it is slavery. It is legal slavery. If you look, like the amendment that made slavery illegal said, except for in the case of punishment, which is why when you're in prison, they can make you work and pay you like I think it's 8 cents an hour or something, completely against the law if you're on the outside. Slavery is allowed in the prison system. It's constitutionally legal to do slavery as punishment. It's there. That was part of the amendment that made slavery of like chattel slavery illegal. Um, yeah, I don't think the government should have the ability to take away your bodily autonomy to that degree. I think in the case of prison, it's almost a necessary evil because the overall outcome of having people who could be dangerous out on the outside, like I'm talking about murderers and rapists and child molesters and whatnot, on the outside could be bad. But even then, I don't think drug addicts and whatnot should be in prison. You know, it's
Yeah.
someone who
Can I ask you
gets,
something like a
yeah.
philosophical conundrum? So,
Sure.
imagine there was like a company, right? And they were just they have a bunch of humans who are trait equalized to animals, meaning they have traits similar to animals, so they lack the trait that generically like most humans would have. So, say intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're equalized to the animals, and this company was just killing them on mass scale. Do you think the government should intervene?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to see like because this all kind of like the abortion veganism thing and this kind of all fit together because it's just an
Well,
issue.
from
It
a
seems
from a
like
practical perspective, you want the government to intervene on something like that, right? Like some Belko experiment type shit, you know, with like people who are like pretty non-neurotypical. I don't want to listen. I'm not trying to get clipped. Okay. Last time I had a conversation with a vegan, it was ask yourself, and he brought up a an example that was like if you had a moon colony that had like a bunch of people who were so mentally impaired they were on the cognitive level of cows, and on this moon colony they were farming these people and slaughtering them and producing their meat. Would you be okay with that? And I said, well, I don't like human meat, but I'd say it's pretty damn comparable to that of our current factory farming. Most people aren't really aware of it. Like most people are blissfully unaware or just purposefully shove it to the back of their heads what goes on in these farms and they just enjoy their burger. I think it's very similar. If you've got like a moon colony doing this. Also, I'm sweat. God damn, Lonnie, can you turn the AC
yeah.
up or turn the AC down? I'm sweating like a motherfucker. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't like. I don't really. I'm not too fond of Ask Yourself. He banned me from his server for not really being good at prop logic. I don't understand.
Yeah,
But
I'm
like
not a
just
big fan of the philosophy bros. It's a little redundant for me, or just a little too esoteric for me.
just real quick. So like if you have the example I gave, right? The thing is why should we? You said we should intervene. The government should intervene because of like
Mm-hmm.
practicality, right?
Yeah,
Or
I
is it
mean you
like
don't
utility?
because if you have a company that's doing some Belko experiment shit with people who are like cognitively disabled, right? And you allow that to go by, what legal precedent keeps companies from doing the Belko experiment? You know what the Belko experiment is, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a movie where they have like all these people in an office and they make them do the Hunger Games type shit. Only one can survive. They have to kill each other. Yeah, like you don't want companies to have that kind of power, just like you don't want the government to be doing that kind of thing. And unfortunately, like practically speaking, the government has the ability to prevent that if they're aware of it. You don't want that kind of stuff to happen.
Yeah. It's just because like I'm trying to understand because you can. I mean, I'm pretty sure we can agree that like once the fetus achieves sentience, whatever at whatever point that is, it's at that point trait
I
equalized.
I
What?
think it's irrelevant. Like that's the problem, though, right? Because I don't think that a fully grown human man who was the victim of a drunk driving accident should have the right to be involuntarily, on the other person's part, hooked up to that drunk driver by an IV. Like, and that person's most definitely a sentient human being. I think sentience and the personhood of that thing has nothing to do with it. I don't think a human being should be forced to um, like to give their bodily autonomy to keep a cricket alive. You know, it doesn't matter. A cricket or even a fucking ultra genius space god. You know, it doesn't matter how sentient or uh, smart the thing is, right? I don't think that a human being should have their autonomy taken away in that sense. Neither do I think that case for animals, right? I think it's a matter of logistics and how we look past it for animals and what we do to animals in factory farming and how we would treat a human in this scenario. A lot of it is just sort of practical, right?
Yeah, I think that I think that the disconnect is that like I do think that sentience should be valued once it's achieved. I think the
Also, I should
problem.
say,
Yeah.
in under no circumstances should a baby who's like, because someone pointed out earlier, under no circumstances realistically would a baby who's a day or a week from being born should ever be aborted. Okay, at that point, it's like not even practical. Like, yeah, have the person give birth. Don't abort a baby who's like gonna be born in a week, right? There's adoption. There's other ways to get around that. But if we've got like a 6 week or an 8 week pregnancy or a 4 month or 5 month pregnancy, then absolutely. If it's but even then, like I think that up until it's just reasonable to say, why not just give birth? The baby will be born in like 2 weeks. Like, why do you want to have the abortion now? Like, I mean, okay, I don't think that would even happen, right? Like you can induce labor, right? Yeah, they wouldn't even, no doctor, nobody would perform an abortion under those circumstances realistically. But like if we're talking about earlier in the pregnancy, yeah, I think the woman should absolutely be able to terminate the pregnancy
Yeah, I
at any
think the
point.
disconnect is just that like the that I think like in my worldview that the woman has the duty to sustain the fetus because of the knowledge of the act which was partaken in, obviously excluding like other cases. But
Rape
like
and
if yeah
incest. What about incest? What about a consensual incestuous relationship and that child is going to be born to be, and you just know the child's going to be born to be very very inbred, just any more inbred and it would be a sandwich, okay? Like you just know because like do you think and that child's going to be like live a very miserable life due to how inbred they're going to be. Do you think that there's a hell, even a moral obligation to prevent that birth almost, like
well
an
I don't think
antinatalist perspective?
yeah I don't think that can be measured, but I do think that if it's still like to remain good faith, it would still have to stand. Like if it was a consensual act, then the mother has a responsibility to that fetus is now like basically in need of her body, right? So that the woman has a responsibility to sustain the fetus.
I disagree. I think it's the completely other way around. I don't think that you have a responsibility to keep something else alive because it needs you. I think if you need to exist, if you need a host to exist, then you need the host's consent to exist. If the host doesn't consent to you existing, then you're infringing on their bodily autonomy. I don't like that.
Yeah, I
Because
guess
at the
it's
end of the
just
day,
it's
if you're pregnant, you're the host to another living being. It's
right.
living off of you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's like a parasitic relationship.
It is a parasitic relationship. Until yeah, no, it is. Well, I guess
I mean,
hold
how?
on. I think technically a parasitic relationship has to have some like downside. Although pregnancy does have downsides, morning sickness, the just general physical like you have a fucking thing inside of you. Your stomach balloon up to be this fucking big. Like that's taking some toll on you. It's a parasitic relationship
Yeah, but
if you
there's
look at the
also a
technical
very strong
definitions.
like there tends to be like a very big hormonal change, and the mother typically has very strong emotional attachments not only
Mm-hmm.
to the fetus but generally the father in
Yeah,
most
well, I
cases.
mean, what about let's say you want to jump into a lake, all right? And this lake is known to at some points have had this parasite that can just kind of climb inside of you and just live inside of you. It needs to live inside of you to survive. And you're like, so this lake has been known to have these parasites sometimes, in the same way that sometimes sex can cause pregnancy. Fuck it, I'll take the risk and I'll jump into the lake. So you jump in the lake, you have a swim, and the next thing you know, this parasite crawled up inside your butthole, and now it's living inside your large intestine. If they take it out, it'll kill it. Do you now, because you knew what could happen getting into that lake, do you now have a moral obligation to let this parasite live inside of you? Because if it's taken out, it'll die.
No, no, that I think that's I can't extend it to that because obviously a parasite is a parasitic relationship, right?
Well,
We've
so is
already agreed that.
a fetus inside of you.
Oh no, I was disagreeing with that. I don't think that a fetus is a parasitic relationship. I thought
Why
you had
not?
agreed with me on that. Well, because
Why
it
not?
produces some sort of net benefit for the host, right?
What about parasites that cause a net benefit to the host then? What if having the parasite inside of you releases some sort of chemical that makes you feel happy all the time, but it's still a parasite and you want it out, even if it's making you feel happy all the time? I'm not
I
saying, by
still
the
don't.
way, that mothers should abort their children if they're gonna if they want the child and they've got some motherly chemicals going on in their brain. That's I know about postpartum depression and how mothers can be very attached to their fetuses in those cases. Why would they even get an abortion if they have the choice not to? Besides like very weird circumstances, like I just cannot care for this child; it'll have a terrible life. Um, like I don't think just because there's sometimes some chemical benefit to the mother that makes it okay and not
Well, no,
parasitic.
I guess, well, no. So I would say that that makes it not parasitic. I think that again, the difference between the parasite analogy or example and this is that the just level of sentience. I'm okay with abortion before sentience. I just think that the responsibility objection is on the mother that like after the fetus has
Well,
reasonably achieved sentience, then
so
we
it's
are passing the level of an actual like just zygote, which has not achieved sentience.
what what makes the difference though? What makes it not a parasite and what makes it okay before it becomes sentient? Also, the argument about when something becomes sentient, especially on a case by case basis with individual fetuses developing, is just something that hasn't been agreed upon yet. It literally just hasn't been. It's still a hotly debated topic that I don't think we'll ever have like a strong answer arrive to. Like, is it the heartbeat? Is it brain function? How do you measure that? How do you measure brain function? Is it
Well, it's
the
the same
brain's
with
development?
personhood, right?
Well,
It's the same with personhood for the fetus, and it's all arbitrary right now. I think it's
it's all arbitrary. They will never have an answer to this. Like it has to be all or nothing. Like it has to be. Practically speaking, the answer has to be all or nothing. Like it's arbitrary. It completely is. Like for what? Okay, so an abortion is bad after the second trimester. Okay, why? Well, because I think after this point it becomes a human. Well, this
well,
person over here thinks it's after the third trimester. This motherfucker thinks it's the insemination. It's the second conception happens. It's a thing, right? No
I
one will
think
ever
there's
agree.
heavy correlation between brainwave activity and sentience.
How do you measure that in a fetus?
I'm not entirely sure.
There's no way you can't measure the sentience of a fetus.
No, but I'm saying if we could measure brainwave activity in a fetus, at that point is when I would draw the
If we
line
had
and
the
say that.
if we had the technological advancements to do so, maybe. But let's talk about a newborn child, a baby fresh out of the womb, has been in the hospital bed for 2 minutes. How sentient are they? Like, really, think about it.
Well,
Like a
they're
baby that
sentient.
was just born.
Yeah, they're. I mean, it depends on what you're describing as sentience. I think they most definitely are sentient, and they're viable. They have the capacity to live on their own. However, they do need external help due to the anatomy of just their existence after right after birth. They can't necessarily get up and care for themselves.
Of
But
course, yeah. And
the,
in the situation of like, this is a case where obviously adoption is an option as well. Also, I have another question to ask you because my girlfriend's asking in chat. But in the case of like a child, I don't think a parasitic. I don't think it's a parasitic relationship when like the child has been born and now the mother is like caring for the child. I don't think it's parasitic. I think the parasitic aspect has to do with the physical requirement for the child living inside of the mother to essentially through the umbilical cord siphon nutrients and it needs the umbilical cord has to be connected and giving blood circulation and oxygen and nutrients to keep the baby growing and alive. But here's what I'm really curious
Wait, hold
about.
on. Let me ask you something real quick. What
Yeah, go
what
ahead.
if there was a situation in which a baby was born and it required nutrients for the rest of its life from the mother's body?
Like,
Yeah, it
in what,
required.
from the only the mother's body? Like, it has
Yeah,
to be like, so like the
it
umbilical
required. It
cord has to stay
required.
uncut.
No, it required like nutrients from like breastfeeding.
I mean, in the case of breastfeeding, it's also voluntary, right? Like, if the baby's already born and it needs breast milk, they're like, if the mom doesn't want to provide that and doesn't want to be the mother, it can, you can obviously get a wet nurse. That's a thing, or you can put the baby up for adoption. There are places where they can care for children that have just been born, and the mother. I mean, mothers die during
Yeah.
childbirth.
This is
Sometimes we've got
entirely
ways to keep the
philosophical though.
child
Like
alive, right?
this. Yeah, no, this is entirely philosophical.
Is it parasitic in that case?
Yeah, would that be like a parasitic relationship?
I don't think so. No, because there's no necessity for the child to have the host. There are other things that can provide that necessity. You know,
Yeah,
that
but that's what
thing.
I'm saying. Like, what if this was the only way? Like, this was the only way that the child could
The
obtain the
only
nutrients.
way.
Yeah, the only way the
Yeah, it
child
would,
could
if
obtain
the
nutrients.
mother didn't want it. Yeah, yeah, that'd be parasitic. If there was nothing, like the mother doesn't want it, and this thing requires the mother's breast milk only. There's no formula. There's no wet nurse. There's nothing else that could happen. Then yeah, it'd be parasitic, and the mother would be able to say, no, I don't want to have my breasts fucking sucked on for this thing to survive. No, I'm not down for that. Then I'd say, okay, yeah, all right.
Okay, yeah. So would it like so? It's basically like up to the needs of the mother.
It's up for the needs for the person who is being to has to provide the thing, right? Like, you don't want someone to have to give up their bodily autonomy for another thing to live.
Well, I just think when we're talking about like the definition of like a parasitic relationship, it shouldn't be like whether or not the mother wants the so-called parasite to feed off her. And like, so
Well, in that
if
case,
they were
there's
okay with it, would it not be a parasitic relationship?
well, in this case, we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. That sort of goes back into culture war stuff. Why does this only apply? Why do you only apply your moral standards to a situation that affects women? Like, this isn't a. I mean, I guess trans men can get pregnant, but that's still pretty fucking rare. This is mostly a thing women have to deal with, right? And this is where it comes down to sort of a political discussion. This is really where, at the end of the day, you have the split between the left and the right on this issue. Is that this is an issue that women have to deal with, right? Women are the ones that have to have this biological imperative that's in many cases decided for them as to whether or not they have to let this thing live inside of them, which really fucking sucks. And it feels shitty to say no. Bunch of male lawmakers are going to decide it's illegal for you to choose what you do with your body, because it is, at the end of the day, choosing what you do with your body. There may be another thing involved in it, but that thing needs you to survive. They're taking away your bodily autonomy to keep another thing alive, whether you like it or not. Other people are making that decision for you by law. And even from a practical perspective, if you keep abortion illegal and someone wants to get an abortion, they're going to get it. It's the same argument as the drug war. They're just going to get it in a way that's less safe than if they got it at like a Planned Parenthood, right?
Yeah, I agree.
They'll get the
That
coat
is
hanger in the back alley.
no, that is a widespread issue that is concerning to me. Also, I hate when there's like loaded arguments too, from kind of like the pro-life side that are kind of like, oh, like she should have just like she should have just not got pregnant, whatever. I just think that there does need to be emphasis on contraceptives or free contraceptives, sexual education. I just think
Yeah.
that there still is a moral responsibility for the woman to carry the fetus because of the again the act which was partaken in, right? And excluding given situations like rape and stuff like that. I mean, and this would even
Well, that's
extend
the
to
thing.
incest.
That's the thing, though, right? Because you have to understand as well. There's another philosophical idea called antinatalism. I'm not on board with antinatalism, but I like to give it a little bit of thought. There are people who think that it's against the autonomy for a child to force them into existence. Though then again, it would also be against the child's autonomy to take them out of existence too, to a degree. It's a very weird gray area because if you think about it, like, fuck, have there ever been times where you felt miserable? Like, fuck, I wish I wasn't born. Have you ever felt that before? I know I
Yeah,
have at some points, right? Everybody who's suicidal and has depression has felt that at some point. So in a way, you're making the decision for that thing, whether or not they live or not. Sometimes they might not want to. You
I,
also have to
I
consider
just
that.
I don't know about that. I don't think that can be measured necessarily. I think that humanity in general has like some sort of purpose. I'm not talking like through a spiritual sense. I just think that like through an evolutionary sense, each individual needs to have the ability or be given the chance to adapt and overcome
Yeah.
natural
No,
selection. Right.
I'm not an antinatalist. No, I think like we should still like. I'm glad I was born. I think I'm glad you were born. I'm glad everybody in my chat was born. I'm glad everybody was born to a degree. I mean, maybe if Hitler wasn't born, it would have been nice. But no, I mean, but I don't think natural selection and what is it called? A naturalistic fallacy, I think it's called. I don't think that appealing to nature is a good idea. Humans, I think, are pretty unique in the sense that we're the only species on this earth that has created what we've created, right? Like there's no other species on earth that have a society like what we have. I mean, like there's tribes of like primates that have some sort of social thing going on, and wolves and et cetera, but nothing to the degree that we have, right? Where we build these mechanically complex things, right? As far as we know, we're the only ones who have done this in the entire universe. I think we're pretty special in that sense. I don't think appealing to nature is the right way to do that. Because if that was the case, if we wanted to appeal to nature, then well, we shouldn't even have farming. We shouldn't even have computers or homes. We should be
Yeah,
living,
yeah.
in trees and in the woods, right? Yeah, I
But
don't think
like
it's a good idea.
going back real quick, the example you gave of like the person jumping into the lake and then the parasite, like going like infecting them or whatever. I think
Yeah,
that
going up
that
their asshole and just latching on in the large intestine.
yeah, that definitely is a parasitic relationship. I don't think we can like conclude definitions based on like whether or not the person hosting the parasite wants it to be in them or not. Because I mean, if that person just didn't care, then it would still definitely be a parasitic relationship, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's a parasitic relationship's a parasitic relationship no matter what. Even if you find out you have a parasite inside of you and you're like, no, I want to keep it. It's still a parasitic relationship. Just like if you have a baby inside of you and you want to keep it, it's still a parasitic relationship. It's just a matter of if you want to get rid of that parasite
Okay.
or
Yeah.
get
I
rid of
was
that
just
parasitic relationship.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. I thought I was just clarifying.
Yeah, like there's so I guess it depends. If we look at like the definitions, mutualistic relationship, I think it's called. You could make the argument that because the mother wants the child and is completely fine with it and is like excited to have the child and yada yada, that's not parasitic. It's mutualistic because the joy of having that child and the excitement for having that child and the desire to have that child is good enough. Like a contribution on the child's side to make it not parasitic because there's a exchange happening there in the same way that like so like there's a lampreys, right? A lamprey is a type of fish that latches on to a larger fish and sucks blood from them and gives nothing back, right? And the fish probably doesn't want it on there if it even knows it's on there, right? But then there's another type of fish that kind of looks like a lamprey, but it doesn't bite onto the shark, onto the animal. Instead of it goes to a shark and it eats parasites off the shark's skin. It's living off of the shark. It's living off of the parasites on the shark, but it's not parasitic because it's giving something back to the shark, taking parasites away. So you could make that argument, but overall, I'd say in the case
Yeah.
where there's no benefit happening to the mother, it's a parasitic relationship. That mother should have the say on whether or not they want to keep that parasite inside of them.
Yeah. So I let me just see, 'cause I don't think I can agree that it is a parasitic relationship in regards to a fetus,
Well,
because of the
I gotta yell in my chat really quick. Life is strange in a moment. Also, I have one question for you. This is what Lonnie wanted to ask you. Why is the driver less morally responsible than the pregnant woman in the scenario brought up before? The drunk driver who got into the car accident. Why are they less morally responsible than a pregnant woman?
no, I said that they are like in that scenario.
They're they're equally responsible.
Yes.
So you do agree that drunk drivers should have to be like tubed up to the victim of that car accident and forced to give blood for 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, if this was a widespread issue, there's probably better ways to go about it. But
Yeah,
I
we're not talking about practically. We're just talking about morally.
yeah.
Um, all right, then I wouldn't agree with that because I
So
don't
like,
think that just morally I don't think anyone should have, and this extends to veganism too. Morally, I don't agree with like factory farming. That's why I'm in favor of like lab grown meat. You just take a little bit of a little brick and you clone the meat and you don't kill the animal it came from. And frankly, getting rid of factory farming and moving to lab grown meat would have a lot of big benefits, like practically outside of that. Climate change is contributed to in great part by factory farming. The amount of woods we have to cut down to have cattle on that land, the amount of we know eating meat's bad for the environment. There's tons of ways it hurts the environment. It's good practically too to be vegan and to get rid of the factory farming industry.
Yeah. Also, just going back on the parasitic relationship, I don't think that a fetus in the mother or parasitic relationship, because the fetus is not benefiting at the expense of the mother, right? So
Well, they
there's
are. They are though.
yeah, they're benefiting at the expense, but there's mutual benefit.
In some cases, there's mutual benefit, and in some cases, there's not. That's why it's on a case by case basis whether or not a mother wants to abort. Right? Some mothers don't want to abort, but I mean, do you know like the symptoms of being pregnant? Like,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
there's a mother who doesn't want to have the child, they have to, and they also like listen. A mother who wants to have the child can look past the symptoms of pregnancy because they want to have the child and that's what they're getting out of it, and it's not that parasitic in that sense. But if they don't want to have the child and they also have to deal with like they're providing sustenance to this child inside of them, and the child has nothing bad happening to them because of it, unless the umbilical cord gets wrapped around their neck, but that's not a thing the mother is doing. And the mother has to deal with morning sickness and pains and aches and cravings and fuck. I mean, they could die during childbirth. There's all sorts of things that can happen. Pregnancy can permanently damage your body too. Like squeezing a child out of your vagina or getting a C-section like my mom got. Like my mom's got a scar on her stomach now for the rest of her life because I had to be cut out. And even if she'd given natural birth to me, it's not a pleasant experience. Imagine the biggest shit you've ever taken. Now, I take some big shits, okay? I mean, guys, I took a shit once so big that it went to the bottom of the bowl and, like, snaked out over the side a little. That's how big the shit was. That is nothing compared to what it's like to squeeze out a child out of your vagina, right? Like, that's something right there. That's some, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
you
I think
piss
like
yourself all the time. You gotta like yeah, it sucks.
I think the placenta in some ways could be described acting in like a parasitic way. I think that the fetus is more of like the fetus and the mother have like an emotional symbiotic state throughout pregnancy.
It depends. The emotional symbiotic state sometimes doesn't exist.
Well, I mean that could be due to external forces. I don't think that justify the means of killing the fetus.
Well, okay, how about this? All right, is it morally wrong to walk up to somebody, tie them up, and cut them with knives?
Probably not. No.
It's not morally right.
To tie someone up and just cut them with knives?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, probably not.
Now, what if consensually that person is into that? They like being tied up and cut with knives, and they consent to it. Then it's okay, I would imagine, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's their kink, that's what they're into. It's the same argument, right? So if a mother wants to have a child and they're excited to have the child and they love it and they have an emotional bond with the unborn child, then it's not like a parasitic thing that they want to get rid of. It's fine, right? Like cool, cool, cool. But if they don't want to have that child and they don't have that emotional attachment, they want to get an abortion, they don't want this thing, they don't like the symptoms of the pregnancy, then it's a parasocial relationship or parasitic relationship. It depends, right?
Not. I mean, not really, because again, it's. I don't think it's a parasitic relationship. Number one, I also don't think that it's justification to terminate the life, because again, the act which was partaken in, right? So that's the part that I'm just going to keep nudging on.
But then again, well, that's just a fundamental disagreement we have then, because you believe that do you agree with like our criminal justice system? Do you like the death penalty?
No.
Why don't you like the death penalty?
Well, I mean, because I'm more in favor of, I'm a compatibilist. I'm more in favor of rehabilitation in order to determine the outcomes of desires.
But morally, you just said before that if someone does something bad, then the government should be able to take away. In the case of like keeping that other person alive, the government has the right to take away their bodily autonomy. Why don't they have the right to take away their bodily autonomy and kill them if it means they keep that person off the streets permanently forever and they can never cause any harm again because they're dead?
Well, because in one situation you have the potential to like determine the future outcomes of that person's desires through rehabilitation, but in the other situation,
Not
that
always.
person.
Well,
That
you
person
do.
could literally be incapable of ever being rehabilitated.
I mean, in that specific scenario, then yeah, I would be in favor of the death penalty. But in generally speaking, no, because there's obviously like means to change future outcomes for the individual based on like rehabilitation and things like that. For the drunk driver, they were impaired and they're still responsible for the action which took place. But if that was happening on like a widespread scale, that there's probably be a better way to handle that.
Well, we're not talking about practicality right now. We're talking about morals.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
All right. Well, so you think that someone committing a crime should have more rights to their bodily autonomy than like a woman who got pregnant?
I, I don't I don't think that's synonymous.
I think it is.
So like I mean you're not really
They did a thing that got them into a they did a thing knowingly. I guess we'll say in this example that got them into a situation that they don't want to be in, and now the government wants to take away their bodily autonomy. In the case of
well no no
of a woman getting pregnant, the government's saying you can't get an abortion, and in the case of the death penalty, the government's saying yeah we're going to kill you because you committed a really bad crime.
the difference is the whole basis for this argument is because for abortion the woman typically consensually partook in the act of having sex in order to produce the outcome of forming another human. So once
They
that
didn't consent to getting pregnant. They consented to having sex, just in the same way that a person can consent to go have a swim in the lake, but they aren't consenting to a parasite crawling up their asshole and
yeah
latching
yeah
onto
but
their large intestine.
that's no that's completely different. That's the whole argument though, because the responsibility is on the woman who consented to partake in the act. So by partaking in
Put it
that, that's
down, dude.
already consenting to allow the fetus to utilize her
So,
body.
do you
That's
think?
the basis of the viewpoint.
All right. So I'm curious if a woman consents to have sex with somebody, and then about halfway through the sex, decides no, I'm done. I don't want to have sex anymore, even though I consented earlier. Let's stop. But that person doesn't want to stop. That's having sex with that woman. That's rape, right? Like we agree it's bad, right?
Yes.
Because consent's been forfeited. So what I'm curious about is, so a woman has sex and she gets pregnant. Why is it now bad for her to decide, I don't want to have this child? I don't consent to having this child in me. I consented to having sex. Doesn't mean I consented to having my entire life turned upside down by getting pregnant. Why should they then be responsible to continue to carry that child when that's not something they've consented to?
No, because again, the whole basis of the argument is that by consenting to the act of having sex, you're consenting to the possibility of pregnancy.
By consenting to having sex, you're consenting to, by that logic, by consenting to having sex, you're consenting to that person you're having sex with deciding they don't want to stop. They want to go for it. They want to get to the nut. They're trying to
I
get that nut, homie.
no, that's entirely not synonymous at all.
I think it absolutely is by this logic.
Because
I think it
the
absolutely is. If you
no
consent
the
to have sex, you could by this logic you're consenting to continuing through it. You're consenting to having sex so that the other person should have the right to
no
nut. You know, they just want a
because
nut, dude.
once no, that's completely flawed. Because what happens, what you just described as an example, is the woman who midway through having sex decides she doesn't want to do it anymore. It makes that clear. So then
Mm-hmm.
that would be rape after that point. That's not
Mm-hmm.
consensual sex at all, right?
Yeah,
So it's
just
not
like
just
a pregnancy where the woman doesn't want it isn't consensual as well. If she didn't consent to have a child, she's consented to have sex. It's the same way where someone may consent to have sex, but not to have the guy nut. She wants to stop halfway through. She doesn't want him to nut, and he keeps going. That's unconsensual. Just like if she gets pregnant, she didn't consent to get pregnant. She just wanted to have sex. That's also unconsensual.
right. But the basis of the argument again is that the partaking of the act of consensual sex is also consenting to the fetus living inside of the mother. So
Mm-hmm.
like that wouldn't be
No.
possible if the woman.
Do you think consenting to take drugs means that the let's say you have a friend. All right, we'll go to even another example. Right.
You can't
Let's say
really
you got a
extend this to anything other than pregnancy. The whole reason this applies and is a base argument for pro life is because of the nature of the fetus being another human, right? We can agree it's another human. It's just we don't know about the whole
Well, nobody agrees that it's
value of
another
it.
human. No one agrees if a fetus is another human. I think
Wait,
it's
you don't
irrelevant.
think?
I don't bother. I don't even bother with trying to decide when a fetus becomes a human.
So
Frankly,
you,
I'm not even fully sold that a newborn baby's a human. You know, like an actual person. Like you're not really
no,
a
you're
person
talking about.
till you're a little older, right?
Well,
If you really think about it.
I mean, I don't. I mean, if you want to get into that, that's a whole weird way of
Yeah, we don't
looking at
have to go
things.
down that road, but yeah, no, I think the argument about when something becomes a human is completely irrelevant to this. We're talking about bodily autonomy and consent, right?
No, no,
I
you're
think it's
having a
very
disconnect
similar.
between like being a human and having personhood. I think that's the disconnect you're having because like we
Well,
can we can agree that inherently that the fetus.
anatomically being a human, sure, they're a human, but are they a person? I think it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's yeah. I don't think that like a newborn baby's a person.
Well, you just said
Someone could
that. Like,
probably convince me, but I mean, I don't
wait,
think it's
you
very
don't think
relevant to the
people
discussion.
you don't think someone becomes a person until they're a bit older?
Yeah, I think what makes someone a person, like what we consider to be a person, I think those aspects don't really set in till they're older, you know, till they've actually developed a personality, till they know language and know how to respond to you and engage in a conversation. Like
Well,
that's just my
personhood is
personal
how
view of
we
it.
value humans, right? We ascribe personhood to humans to give the human value, right? So like when
Sure,
someone's in a
but
coma,
I think
we take
but
away their.
most logic lords I'd argue would say that they'd save a doctor or like a full-grown man over like a infant during the trolley problem, right? Because that full-grown human is like more of a person than the infant is, I would argue.
I guess. I mean, but they still have both reasonably achieved personhood. I think it
I
would
don't
be
think so.
very well. You don't think an infant is a person? You think it's just a human? Like it hasn't achieved
I
any
think it's
sort of
just a human.
value?
Yeah, it's like a fresh save of a video game. You know, like it's got a while to go before it becomes serious. You know, like if somebody here, how about this? Right, you ever play a video game that like has a lot of content. You can really get into it, and you have like hundreds of hours, thousands of hours on that game. Then your friend picks up the game and has 5 hours, and you're like, you're playing the game, but you're not really playing the game yet, right? Like until you've got like 20 hours, then you're really playing the game, right? Right now you're just dipping your toes in. You're still in the tutorial, right? I see it very similar to that way, right? There's certain
Well,
aspects to personhood that we consider that infants don't have yet. I don't think it makes it like right to just stomp a baby on the street, right? I don't think that gives them that right. Just like I don't think it's right to stomp a puppy on the street, just because oh well, it's not a person, right? No, but I don't think it's reached the level of personhood that say I have or like a 10-year-old has.
well, I don't. I just don't think there's levels to personhood. I think that the status of just being a person or having personhood, according to the law at least, it's the it's the part in which like people achieve legal rights and have protections and privileges and responsibilities.
Well, the law doesn't justify like we don't build our morality around the law. We build the law around our morality.
Yeah, well, I think that inherently a person, someone who's been given personhood, should have rights, protections, and privileges and things like that. So I don't. I think that would definitely
Well, yeah, I think
extend
it
to
should be
infants.
illegal. Well, all right, hold on. So the reason why it's illegal to smother a baby in the crib, who was that lady that killed her baby? Can't remember what her name is. I was gonna make a reference to that. It was gonna be funny and kind of dark. But the reason why you can't do what that lady did, who murdered her child, and I think got away with it, right? But everyone knows she did it. The reason why you're not allowed to do that is because if you set a boundary on when a already born baby becomes a person, or gains the rights of personhood under the law, then you start to get into some gray area, like in terms of morality. Like, okay, well, now the law doesn't even know when someone becomes a person, right? So that's more of a pragmatic thing than like a moral thing, I think. If you're trying to appeal to the law, Casey Anthony, yeah, Casey Anthony, yeah,
Yeah, I
there it is.
think
She's the
that
lady who murdered her
infants
baby.
just in general should definitely have inherent rights ascribed to them. Just in
Practically,
case
yes, I
they're.
think that's true. Like if you're just born, but the thing is with fetuses, I disagree there, right? Like obviously, I think this is actually interesting to challenge my point, and I'm curious what your take is on it. A guy shoots a pregnant woman in the stomach, killing her and her unborn baby. Is that now a double murder? That's an interesting discussion too, right? I would
It
argue,
depends.
yeah, that's a double murder.
Well, yeah. I mean, then you're saying you're saying that the fetus has some sort of value, right?
Yeah, but it's also in the same way. You could also bring that to like, well, what if you shoot through a person and then also destroy like their car? So now you've just killed a person and destroyed their property. You should probably be charged for both, right?
So if the fetus has some sort of ascribed value in your viewpoint, then what is like the trait differentiating like thing between the fetus and the mother?
What's the trait differentiating them?
Yeah, like what is a
Um,
trait difference between the fetus and the mother?
the only important thing is that the fetus needs the mother to survive, and the mother does not need the fetus to survive.
Right. So what if there, again, going back to the early example, what if there was a baby who needed to survive off of the mother's nutrients for the rest of its life? So what would be the trait
Same,
difference between?
same thing. It'd be
There'd
no
be no
no
trait difference.
change. No. If it needs to, even if this thing becomes like a 30-year-old man and needs the mother to survive, still needs to be just 24/7 sucking on them titties. Even then, it would be a parasitic relationship, unless of course the mother is like, oh no, I love it when my 30-year-old child is sucking on my boobie.
So would you be okay then with the mother killing the person or human?
Murdering it or just refusing to do that?
Well, no, just killing it.
Like murdering it?
I mean, I don't want to use like a loaded term. I'm just saying, just killing, just exterminating it. Yeah.
It depends. If you just take a knife or a pillow and just smother it to death, then probably not. But if it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to feed you now, and it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna keep, like, I'm not gonna spend the rest of my life having my breasts fed off of. I think morally, it's permissible. Yeah, I think it's like it's a hard choice to make, and it's sad, and it's a sucky situation. But I think at the end of the day, it is the mother's choice to make in that circumstance.
And that's solely relying on the fact that the other individual requires the mother's autonomy to survive, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's exactly the same as the car accident thing, right? Where like the baby, or at this point you could say it's even a 10-year-old now that still needs to keep breastfeeding to stay alive, and there's no other way to keep the baby alive. It's just like the drunk driving thing. I think it's actually pretty similar, right? The personhood of the other individual doesn't really bother me. Like at that point, no. I think that like the personhood doesn't matter as to whether or not it's a parasitic relationship.
So would you extend this to like any example in which an individual is requiring another individual's autonomy to survive?
Well, and everyone in the chat wants Life is Strange, so we're gonna have to wrap things up. Wait, what was your last question?
Oh yeah, what would you extend this to like any situation in which like an individual requires another individual's autonomy to survive?
Yeah, if the individual whose bodily autonomy is required for the other to survive doesn't consent, then yes. Obviously, there can be a consensual case of this. You can wake up from the drunk driving accident and they say, "Hey, we need to hook you up to this person for 9 months." And you can be like, "All right, yeah, sure," and that's fine. But if you say no, I don't think the doctors have a right to pin you down and force you to be hooked up to this person. The same way I don't think that the government has the right to say you need to spend the rest of your life breastfeeding this thing 24/7 because if you stop it'll die, and it is now your moral responsibility to keep this thing alive forever. I think that person should have the right to say no, I'm sorry, it's going to have to this thing is going to have to die, like it's
Wait,
going to
wait,
have to
but
starve to
finally,
death because I'm
finally,
not
and
going to keep
finally,
giving
so
it
like,
life.
what if the person partook in the act knowing that the possible outcome was another individual having to, require their breastfeeding for the rest of their life?
If you walk down the street in a bad neighborhood and you think there's a possibility you could get robbed, do you think it is now morally okay for that person to be robbed? Because, well, hey, they knew it could happen. They
Wait,
walked in a
Zan,
bad
please,
neighborhood.
please, I know you gotta go, but like, don't answer like question with a question, please.
No, I think it's just, I don't think the knowledge of that being a possibility means that you are now morally obligated to now support that. Just like I don't think if someone knowingly goes into a bad neighborhood to walk to the store and gets mugged, that's suddenly like, well, fuck you. You should have known. It was possible. It's completely irrelevant.
Okay, yeah. Well, the mugger still doesn't have is not in a position to assert their will on that
Well,
individual.
it's the same as if a woman has sex consents to having sex with a guy. Who knows? The guy could decide he doesn't want to stop halfway through because he wants to get his nut. If she consents to sex, then she's no. There's a chance that guy could just say nope. I'm going to keep going if when she decides she doesn't want to do it anymore.
That
And
would be
then now it's
that would be
rape.
rape. Yeah.
Yeah, now it's rape. That we acknowledge that just because there's a danger or a risk in doing something doesn't make it now okay for that bad thing to happen. Just like there's always a risk when you go out driving, but if someone crashes into you, let's say in this circumstance no one's drunk, we don't say, well, fuck you. You knew that this could happen while you're driving. You usually get reimbursed in some way, right? Like your insurance company pays for things, or you get taken to the hospital, right? We don't put moral onus on people that are doing certain things that are considered normal or whatever because there's a chance things could go wrong and something could happen. We don't generally subject people to the outcomes of that just because fuck you knew this could happen, right?
All right, yeah. Well, thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it. Can I upload this if you don't mind?
Yeah, if you want to. Yeah, I want to give one final example because
Okay.
this one came to mind immediately. You get on an airplane and you take a flight. There's a chance the flight could crash, and if it does, you're allowed to sue the airline if you survive the plane crash, right? Yeah, legally we just as a society we say just because there's a risk that something could happen doesn't mean you don't have a reasonable expectation that it might that it won't, and that you're consenting to that thing happening just because you consented to do the thing that had a risk of that other thing happening. I think it's a
Yeah, well, I
slippery
just
slope.
think that in this specific scenario, regarding abortion, it's just a matter of an individual asserting their will on another individual, whether or not you think that individual has a value or not, is like a different, I guess, argument. But
Okay, I know my chat's gonna be mad, but I have one final
yeah,
question. I'm just gonna leave it here. We're not gonna continue the argument afterwards. Do you think a child being inside of the mother, do you think that child, that fetus, is asserting its will on the mother by living inside of it?
no, because the mother typically knowingly, partook in an act in which she knew the possible outcome being the fetus relying on her body. So by doing that, that's consenting to the fetus
I don't
utilizing
think
her
so.
body.
Just like I don't think like a woman consenting to sex means that she consents to the guy continuing when she doesn't want to anymore. Because
Well,
I
if
don't
she
know. I don't.
establishes she doesn't want to, then that's rape afterwards.
What if the woman establishes that she doesn't want to have the child after she gets pregnant?
No, that's she didn't that didn't change the act of having sex though, right?
Sure, but you can change just like you can stop having sex at any moment. You can also stop being pregnant by getting an
Yeah, but
abortion.
what I'm saying is that, like, again, consensually having sex, you are also given this worldview. You're also like consenting to, I guess, housing that fetus throughout the term of the pregnancy.
I don't know. I think a lot of pregnant women who want to get abortions, if you ask them, did you consent to getting pregnant when you had sex? They'd say no. That's not what they wanted.
Yeah, I guess. Well, it was good talking to you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I gotta get to Life is Strange now, or my chat's gonna come bust in with pitchforks and torches and try to behead me like some French Revolution shit.
Yeah, if you ever want to talk again, I'll message you in your chat.
Alrighty. There's a lot of other interesting stuff we could have gotten into, like what if a man lies to a woman about having a vasectomy and they have sex and she gets pregnant and she was lied to. Going into the sex, she was convinced that it was impossible to get pregnant. Like you could really get into it from there. But yeah, I got to get back to the game because my chat's angry. They hate abortion arguments. They really do hate this philosophy shit.
Yeah,
But
and regardless, like just partaking in the act of having sex is consenting to having the fetus live off your body, regardless, unless you establish that there's that you don't want to continue.
all
Then
right,
it'd
I'm
be
gonna
rape.
ask you. Then I'm gonna ask you about the vasectomy thing. What if a woman does? What if a guy does lie to a woman about having a vasectomy? And if you have a vasectomy, you can't have kids. Do you think that the woman is consenting to the possibility of having children if she's lied to by a guy who says he's had a vasectomy?
100%, because you're still consensually having sex, and just the act alone, regardless of what the other individual told you, there's still a possibility, right? Unless there's any type of coercive nature going on there.
Do you think it's rape
What is?
to lie to a woman and say you've had a vasectomy but you actually haven't, and then you're not inside of her and you lied to her? Do you think it's rape?
I mean, I I don't know, because that's a really like loaded term. I don't
It's
really know
rape.
if
I'm gonna give you it's rape. If you
yeah,
lie
yeah.
to somebody about something so severe going into sex, it's rape. Like if you lie to somebody about like yeah, it's rape. I'm gonna go ahead and throw my hat in the ring there and say it's rape. And I don't think even someone who's pro-choice, like, do you believe that like babies that are a product of rape should be required to?
No, no, yeah, definitely not. I think like pregnant women who have been raped obviously should be allowed to have an abortion.
All right, cool. Alrighty, I shall talk to you later somewhere down the road. And I'm
Yeah.
sure it'll piss off my chat because they hate these discussions.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Have a good one, okay?
You too.
That got really interesting towards the end there. It would have been cool to explore that a little bit more. Anyway, if you enjoyed that video, please leave a like, subscribe, ring the bell icon, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. Links in the description. And of course, if you want to support me financially to help the channel out and keep it going, you can always donate, subscribe, gift a sub, or whatever on my website, on Twitch, or super chat, or hit the join button, become a channel member on YouTube, which gives you all sorts of cool perks on the YouTube channel, including becoming the top comment and getting like reserved spaces in the comment section so that your messages appear at the top. And I always get notified whenever people who are channel members sub or comment on things. It's super cool. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.